evening, and welcome to the Ombudsman's program. I am Diane Welborn. I am the Ombudsman, and I'm going to be your host for this evening's program. Tonight, I am thrilled to have with me Brian Martin, who is the Executive Director of the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Thank you for the invitation, Diane. It's my pleasure.
Great, glad to have you here. And we are going to be discussing a relatively new report, which is called the Miami Valley Equity Regional Profile. That's a mouthful, but it's got a lot of facts and figures with it, and we're going to take our time and go through this tonight. So again, the Miami Valley Equity Regional Profile is our topic, and it's on the screen for the viewers. I also wanted you to be reminded that this is a call-in program. And so if we are discussing something about which you have a comment or a question, we welcome you calling in to the program. So we'll go ahead and get started then.
All right, let's do it.
Let's talk a little bit about first of all, what gave rise to this report. I know you partnered with the Division of Ohio State. Let's talk a little bit about the background of how this came to be and why you produced it.
That's right. And this is my 5th year in the position as executive director. And I knew at some point, we had to address all of Dayton and Dayton's citizens and residents, as well as the Miami Valley's regions. I was surprised to learn that Dayton is the region is very segregated.
Yes, it is.
And our resources are very segregated across the 5-county region. So we really needed to get to this. My first 3 or 4 years were really to learn more about the job and region and people. But really we started a year and a half ago on this profile, and we just knew we needed to dig a little bit more deeply to try to help all of Dayton.
Okay, well, we're very glad that you did.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your partnership with Ohio State. Excuse me.
Yeah, OSU, the Kerwin Institute is a wonderful resource. I believe they're about several years old, at least 20. And one of their researchers, Matt Martin, is from Dayton and worked at our agency.
Okay.
And so he took an interest in Dayton, even though he had moved over to Columbus and worked for Kerwin Institute. And kind of independently, my staff and I were talking about this topic of equity in planning. What do we do about it? We need to do more here in the Miami Valley with equity. And so through that, we did a lot of other work and got that out of the way, and that kind of cleared up the decks so that we could work on equity. So they've been a great partner and resource for us.
Well, that's wonderful, and it's an excellent report, and we will give people your website later in the program.
Okay.
So if they want to download it and look at it themselves, they can. So when did you all get actually started on amassing all of the data that this report entails?
It was about a year-long process. Kerwin, we provided them local data, local census data, and other data that we had, data sets we had, and they have a process involving 14 factors, 14 variables in their mapping process. So once they have the data, they perfected this mapping process, and so they applied it here in the Miami Valley.
Okay. Well, it may be rather basic. Let's start with some definitions then.
Sure.
Let's define equity for our viewers, how you're using it for this report.
Equity is just one of those words that, because you can't see it and touch it and feel it, it's just harder to describe. But our working definition means that equity means that all people, regardless of where they live, have access to the resources and opportunities that improve their quality of life, allowing them to reach their full potential. So that includes many things like jobs and safe, affordable housing, educational opportunities, getting to the store. Naturally, transportation is a component of that. Ideally, you walk to where you want to go, because we do promote walking and bike riding as an agency. But for many people in isolated areas, that's not the case. For many folks, only RTA is their primary choice. Or a relative, So the more segregated that people are, or the farther they are away, they need a better transportation option. So, RTA is there, but it may take a longer trip than, say, someone that is in a highly a high opportunity area. So that's what we're getting into as we looked at all this data.
Okay, well that is just very exciting. And then along with equity comes the whole concept of having opportunities. And so that's a very important part of this report as well. Could you say a little bit more about the opportunities that you all use?
Well, the opportunities are a key component, of course. So I talked a little bit about what those indicators are. So housing and neighborhoods, everyone wants to live in safe neighborhoods,
right,
walkable neighborhoods, with the corner store and other things like that right there in their neighborhoods, the school, the park, et cetera. Transportation, access to public transit, ideally access to a bikeway network, near their home so they can jump on a bike. Great transit, as I said, safe streets, outstanding sidewalks are all a component of great transportation. Economic and job access. The farther you are from your job, well, you have to get up earlier to get to work.
True.
And it could take more time. So, it really needs to be, a job that can sustain you as you're making your 30 or to an hour a long commute. So unemployment, median household income, poverty, labor force participation rate, those are other indicators of opportunity. And then lastly, educational attainment. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was a big deal to have your high school diploma. Now, as most know, you have to have something else above the high school diploma. If it's a college degree or a certificate or some job training certificate, that's really what's needed. So those are the major opportunity indicators that we use.
That you used. Well, we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about those then. But I think I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of our area and where the inequity arose.
Yeah.
And so we do have a slide on this, and it's entitled Major Forces of Inequity. It looks like the cogs. We have it right
That's
here.
right. That's right.
Okay. So the viewers can see this as well. So
Yeah.
tell us what we're looking at with the cogs in this first interesting diagram.
Well, as all cities developed across the U.S. at the turn of the 20th century, banks had a strong role, developers had a strong role as we became more and more industrialized in locating where the housing would be and which people would be in those homes. And so, forces like redlining and racial covenants, redlining from the banks, saying
Yes.
do not develop in this or that particular area. Racial covenants, you buy a piece of property and it's included in the deed that, certain groups are not to be in that house or in that neighborhood.
Right.
So it seems far-fetched right now, but that's how things were, at that time as we developed. Highway construction. Sometimes there's unintended consequences, and my agency has been a part of some major projects. If you think about interstates, when they're developed by the state, they want to find the cheapest lane that they can find. Okay, but a lot of neighborhoods have been impacted across the country, and I'm sure here in this region as well,
Right.
as those I-75, I-675 were put in. So that's another unintended consequence from that transportation improvement. Another blockbusting and steering, urban renewal and public housing, predatory lending practices, all of those aspects with, as we develop, decisions were made perhaps in the back room without a public involvement process.
Right.
By those businesses, by those developers. And if you think in the 20s and 30s and 40s, as we were developing rapidly, these factors played a role, and they continue to play a role in how we've developed and a lot of our challenges right now.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. That's good. It's good to kind of know where we've come from and
That's
what
right.
what we kind of have in front of us. I find this homeowners loan incorporation map just really fascinating. So I hope that our viewers can see this. It's the, oh no, go back please. It was on the earlier slide.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the second graph on the left side of the screen. And a major proportion there is green. A major proportion is a lighter green, but it's spread out more. Then there's a large section of blue and a large section of pink. So this is actually some of the color coding of credit worthiness in neighborhoods, which is, I'll let you say, but it's directed to how much investment people can make in property. What kind of home loan can you get?
Exactly right. Exactly right. And green is always good, and red or pink is not.
Yeah.
So A through D,
Yeah.
a D is a bad score, A is a great score. So this is an example of the types of tools that banks used and developers used to develop our city of Dayton and nearby areas.
And that's from 1937.
1937.
And you can see the pattern very clearly there that led to inequitable resources for development in those particular areas.
But in 37, in that era, neighborhoods were very compact.
Yes.
And many of the services were right there in those neighborhoods.
Right.
And the church, the school, the store, the corner store, all of that was right there. So it was a different time back then.
And didn't have quite as many cars. I've been told that we have a caller that has a question or a comment. Okay, please go ahead. We'd like to hear your question. You're on the air.
Yes, thank you for this wonderful program. I want to commend the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission for confronting this issue of the lack of equity, access to opportunity, and want to express my appreciation to the Ombudsman program for featuring it. I wanted to first say something about the importance of data. I've had a chance to read the regional profile, and the data is very impressive and convincing. And in subjects like this that are sometimes controversial or partisan, data is so important. This big book by the French sociologist Thomas Piketty on the rise of inequality has made an impact precisely because he developed a huge data set. And the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission, should really be commended for developing information. But my question is this. Information doesn't always translate into motivation. And so my question is, what efforts are underway or have been undertaken to motivate people to do something about the lack of equity? Earlier this year, I saw a very powerful film made by the Kirwan Foundation called Free to Ride. And my goodness, after I'd seen that film, I was ready to go out and do something about access to transportation. Are there other things like that that are motivational in character? Well, I've talked for too long. Thank you for listening to my question.
Well, thank you for your comment, and we will come and address that about motivation. I know you do want to get to that. I think can we come back to that toward the end of the film? So caller, you're going to have to viewer, you're going to have to stay with us to get the answer. We're going to go through a little bit more of the data first, but we will not forget that excellent question about motivation, because that's the reason for doing all of this work, is to get to that point. So. Okay, before we, let's go back to the slide we had up again, please, the one that starts with the aggregate income. Here we are, top of the right. This is 1980 distribution of income and minority communities. What should we take away from that?
Well, really, back in 1980, and it seems like yesterday, but it's 30 years ago.
Yes, it is.
It's very different. Dayton, Ohio, and Miami Valley region. I mean, you see the freeways there in dark red, 70 and then 75, and then parts of other roadways may not have been built yet. But you're certainly seeing in the dark green the top 25% of the region's aggregate income. And so the darker green you see there, I'll call it the airport area up north of I-70, getting up 75 into Miami County, the northwest Montgomery County area. And then the lighter green, those are the bottom 25% of the region's aggregate income. And those are much more dispersed. You see, southwestern Montgomery County, you see eastern and southeastern Greene County, you see portions of Miami, and then we're showing dark up there in the 10 o'clock position, Dark County. And then in the 7 o'clock position, 8 o'clock position, there is Preble County. So a lot of rural poverty as well as urban poverty being shown here back in 1980.
And then I'm sure the point of the juxtaposition here is to show the movement between 1980 and then on the bottom right part of the screen here we have the 2010 aggregate income.
Right.
And you can see the shifts.
Yes. Just keep in mind that we switched colors. We went from the green to the brown, shades of brown. So the darker brown there, you see a lot of the same areas that are still in the highest 25% of the region's aggregate income. But you start to see a pattern where freeways are paying a huge importance, and particularly the interchanges, where the interchanges are located. So in Miami County, there you see Tip and Troy and Piqua, Tip City and Troy and Piqua. As you look down into Montgomery County, what was green back in 1980 has shifted so that if it's not in the bottom 25%, it's not in the top 25%, right. Certainly in certain areas. But you start to see the I-675 effect in this as you look at that crescent that goes east of downtown Dayton. So certainly, that's been beneficial to those areas. If you look at western Greene County, southern Montgomery County, certainly that freeway improvement has been beneficial to those communities in that part of the region.
And so it all really just kind of moved southeast.
Yes.
It moved southeast from the center of Dayton.
And that's only in a 30-year period
right.
that we're looking at.
Right. That's remarkable. Okay, the next slide that we have is going to take us into the geographic areas of opportunity, and these are those opportunity factors you listed before. And I'm being told we have another call.
All right.
So we're going to take your call now. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call, and I may have missed it. I was just a couple things. I'm wondering if he can express a little bit more and describe what the Miami Valley area is and what all it includes. And that's one question. And the other thing is, can he share with us which communities or whereabouts in the Miami Valley that there have been the greatest change in the kinds of things you're talking about in terms of poverty and homeownership and those kind of things? I'd like to hear a little bit more of that if we could. Thank
you very much. Yes, we can certainly. I think we should probably get that answer out here now. Because we've mentioned the five areas, but you want to speak about the area that your agency covers, and then we can come back and talk about the towns.
Absolutely. The purview of this study, caller, and all the watchers of the program is Montgomery County, of course, as well as Greene County, Miami County, Dark County, and Preble. We also include northern Warren County, which includes Franklin, Carlisle, and Springboro, as a part of our study area. So some of that is in our urban area, eligible for funding. Some of it isn't, but that's the purview of this equity study.
Okay, and I think her other question was something about the which communities have experienced the greatest change. So we kind of saw that on the map, but I'll let you.
We did. Many other studies that we've seen have focused on, Dayton or inner suburbs of Dayton and the impact. We think this is the first multi-county look at this topic of equity, and so we're very proud of that. So while we may focus a lot on urban poverty and urban inequity, a lot of things like that happen in rural areas as well, where mom or dad or both are still on the farm. They want to age in place. They like where they are, so they may need a meal, or they may need a doctor visit. Someone to take them to the doctor, or that type of thing, even in the rural areas. So. A lot of it, transportation is key in all of this, so that's why it makes sense for us to take a look at this study. But in terms of the switches, as we said earlier, from 80 to 2010, the opportunities were more centralized, but because of I-675 and the rounding out of our freeway system, a lot more of those opportunities turned out to be in southern Montgomery County, as well as western Greene County, and northern Montgomery on into Miami County.
Okay, so they kind of went up in those areas. I also think it's interesting to get the larger view than just the city of Dayton, because you want to see where people moved.
Right,
where they
exactly right. What about the other side of the coin? That's right.
Excuse me.
That's
okay.
right.
All right, this, again, we're going back here to talking about having access to opportunities, and opportunities being, defined again as educational, as affordable housing and safe housing and access to transportation. So talk us through this graph, please.
Well, basically, we're seeing the result of, if you think about the economy and where those economic hubs are in our region, they're the ones that are turning out to be green, in this mapping. So green is good. When you look at 1980, in terms of access to opportunity, both high and low, it's spread out as a population spread out. So as people moved, as new employers came in, so did the opportunities. If you live in an area where you also have a lot of employers, well, you're going to show up as the dark green, and that's pretty much what's happened as you look in southern Montgomery County, northern Warren County, over into Greene County, in and around Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and also into Miami County. Lower access, those are the more decentralized, remote areas that are showing up as brown. And on the 1980 map, you see some of that out in the rural areas, but in 2010, you see more of the lower access to opportunity. So, as I said earlier, transportation would be the great equalizer. Hopefully you have a great car, or you have great access to a wonderful transit line and can get there quickly. If not, then you're going to have challenges with getting to those opportunities.
There's no doubt that we have lost opportunities in this change here. And down here on these bar graphs down here at the bottom, what?
Yeah. Well, basically, we're just showing the percent of access to opportunity based on the population. And you see how much of the population has great access to opportunity. You see the numbers are getting worse overall. At the top bar is 26% in 2010 of the total population having good access to opportunity, plus the 9%. So that's 35% total in 2010, whereas in 1980 it was 31%. So about the same in terms of the top level, but the middle and the lower are really getting larger. So in terms of access to opportunity for our population, the numbers have gotten worse, if you look at this on aggregate overall.
Yes, that's a very important statement there for that.
And likewise on the households follow the population, of course. So that's just taking another look at that based on our number of households.
Okay, good. I think now we'll move to the next slide about showing us here about the 2014, which is not the long longitudinal studies of the other ones, but here's a picture in time in 2014.
Snapshot in time.
Yeah, okay. So this opportunity map, again, the higher access is the green.
That's right.
And the large one on the upper left, and the less access is brown.
That's right. Yeah, a lot of what we talked about for 2010 extended 4 years to 2014. So, those same areas, southern Montgomery, eastern Montgomery, western Greene, central Miami County, parts of Darke County up around Greenville and other places as well show in the green area. But still a lot of urban poverty. If you look at the core of Dayton and the near west side, that's really, as of 2014, lower access to opportunity as you see there, as well as the rural areas.
Right. And even though the brown area there in West Dayton is really not far from the green area.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
It's not like it's way off on the other side of,
Yeah.
of the county.
I would say the difference there is probably I-70 and the investments that have been made along
Right.
the interstate.
Right, right, exactly. And then, of course, you all also looked at this according to the factors of minorities and single-parent households and people in poverty, which are the three lower graphs
That's right.
there. And I think our viewers would like to hear a little bit more about those changes.
Yeah. Well, as the changes have occurred over time, minorities are noticeably more isolated in the urban core and in areas with less access to opportunity. Basically, those that can get out or that want to get out or that can afford to get out and follow those opportunities to the southeast did. Those that couldn't, they may be upside down in their home, or they may have a low mortgage note currently and want to stay. It's whatever everyone wants to do. This is just what's occurred over time.
Okay.
Yeah. So we did focus on minorities and specifically African American population, as well as single parent households. We just saw some commonalities in the data in those two factors, as well as people in poverty.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, that's what we're seeing.
Very important there. Okay. Then I think I think it may be our last slide. Yes, our last slide with data. If we could show that one, it's got, yes, there we are with the bar, equity now for people. Okay.
Yeah, the very top one, 64% of black people live in areas with lower access to opportunity. And we see that in the geographic areas of the maps that I discussed earlier. That's a very high percentage. But again, these numbers track with poverty. So I don't know offhand the population in poverty for the county or among the black population, but that's the number that we have. And likewise, access to opportunity so that's by race, so there's a lot of good information there.
Yes.
So white, black, Asian, other races, and Hispanic, you see the data there on the top chart. The next one has to do with access to opportunity by household type. So that's where you get into the tracking the data with the single parent households.
Okay.
So over 30% of single parent households are living in areas with lower access to opportunity. So they're dealing with a single parent dealing with all that two parents, used to deal with together. Now they're single. So yeah, daycare for the child, working a job, upkeep on your home, all of those factors, paying your car note, making sure you have transportation. So on top of dealing with all those day-to-day issues, then you also have the access to opportunity, being in the lower rung for that.
Yes.
So yeah, it's very tough.
Very challenging. And then, of course, with poverty, it
Yes.
goes back up even higher again.
Exactly. So we think this is a comprehensive look at our region. We've discussed the data, but I'm sure we'll talk about what we can do going forward.
Yes. As our caller had about, it motivates us to come do something else. Well, your agency has some principles that I thought might be really worth talking about. Principles of investing in equity. Now, is this? Why don't you explain to our viewers who may not have heard that term before what is meant by investing in equity?
Well, basically, we have the data. So what? What are we going to do with it? Let's move ahead. Let's use this data to inform the way forward. for the next 10 years, 20 years. And so we're very much about that. We want to look at all of our investments that we make as an agency in transportation infrastructure, but we also want to help our members. We have 50 local government members, cities, villages, townships, counties. We want to help our members to look at their growth and their development very holistically and comprehensively, and to do it now while the economy has improved. Now is a great time to be planning and to be looking ahead, to do their strategic planning and comprehensive planning. So issues like equity are very important for their communities. We are a graying community. We are a graying region. We talk about workforce. Well, it's hard to develop a workforce if most are retired. So the children, the millennials, the Gen Zers that are here, we want them to be able to contribute as soon as possible. So there's also a linkage with education and with a lot of other programs as a part of this too. So we want to encourage our members to make smart investments, smart decisions in their communities, and we need to make sure that those transportation systems can be in place to address a lot of the inequity that we're seeing, as well as other programs like redeveloping their neighborhoods, the housing stock, keeping up with that, as well as attracting new commercial opportunities within those communities.
Right. I'm sure that that all of this data has been very well received by the planning community, who already kind of knows how to do this. So where else are you taking this data and this information to distribute this and perhaps maybe educate some other sectors on how to use this and how to invest in equity?
Yep. So what? Let's move forward and roll this out to the community. We had our first listening session back in November, and we invited many social agencies to be a part of this, including United Way and Learn to Earn, the various colleges and universities, large corporations, to be a part of the discussion, because they've been dealing with a lot of these issues a lot longer than we have. So in a lot of ways, they were the experts. We did the study. We want to learn from them as well as add our knowledge of the data and information going forward. So we're very pleased.
Yes.
Is that a comment?
No, that's okay.
All right. So we just had our first listening session, and we had a presentation in December, and you were there, yes. Diane. Thank you for being there.
I loved it.
With the APA Miami Valley workshop in early December over at Sinclair Community College. We had a wonderful panel that talked through the equity profile as well as other issues that are affecting our community. How can we pool our resources together to address this very important topic for all of our region?
And are more listening sessions planned?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What's ahead for us?
A lot of the focus so far after that first listening session was on urban issues and Dayton and nearby jurisdictions. We want to take it on the road to the south. We've had the faith-based community has become very interested in this topic because they're dealing with a lot of the same issues and want to do something from a moral standpoint, a social program standpoint. So the United Methodist Church has stepped up in Kettering and has offered to also be a host for another listening session. And Kettering has a blend of a lot of what we saw, green and brown,
right.
On our maps there. So I think that would be a great place, a central location, to at least discuss the issue in Montgomery County and the nearby areas. So, right. So we're very optimistic about that. We hope that we can get something like that scheduled in more of a suburban location to talk about, both sides of the coin. Everyone wants to help. You look at the data, you see that there's a need there. Let's do it. Let's pool our resources and make something happen.
So you are ready to be invited. You and your team are ready to be invited to come and talk about this.
Yes.
Whenever. Okay.
If you have a planning commission meeting or a neighborhood meeting or a church meeting and you want to talk more about it, please give us a call.
Okay.
We'd love to be there.
All right. Now let's also take, at this time, I'd like to give your website, and we'll probably give it again before we close the show, but let's have your website so people can go actually get this
Sure.
data for themselves.
Sure, it's www.mvrpc.org, Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission, mvrpc.org, and then /regional profiles. I believe regional profiles, there's a hyphen in between the two. Yeah. But that's where you can go, and you'll find about 9 profiles on there dealing with various issues like the equity we're highlighting right now, but there's economic profiles there, housing, vacancy, diversity, a lot of profiles there. We thought we would create profiles like this, make them web-based, as opposed to a very large document,
Yes.
that a lot of folks wouldn't want to read. So, and in addition to the mapping that we put into the document, you can create your own profile as well, because there's a dynamic section in the mapping that you can go and create your own map based on if you want to drill down into your neighborhood or nearby. You can do that with that dynamic.
So that's already
mapping.
available.
It's already available on the website.
All right.
This is the PDF that we've been highlighting tonight. But there's another option that to click, and you can get to a more of a create your own map opportunity.
I'm sure there are lots of neighborhood leaders who are going to want to be able to use that.
I hope so.
And take a look at that. Yes, yes, of course. Let's circle back again to the investing in equity. What are some of those principles, since many of our viewers might not have really heard? What does that actually mean when you're looking at a project? Yes.
Yeah. Well, there's always a lot of variables, factors that developers that we as an agency look at before we make our investment decisions. And so households and residential data is very important, as well as employment data, educational attainment, and so forth. So we really love to see those factors get improved over time. So that's why we've also reached out and started working with other segments of the community as well.
Who are trying to make impact through their own programs.
That's
and
right.
their own funding and their own
Right.
Opportunities there. Do you see a kind of top 10 list that is there such a thing that's come about yet, or is
Not
that
yet.
still under development?
Not yet. We led the study. We're data and mapping people, and
Yes.
we were happy to do that. I think we're a little ways away from here are the 5 things that we can do to have the most impact. But I think through working with this new partner group, I think we'll get to those. Well, certainly public transit.
Transit.
Making sure that we have great transit, countywide, region-wide for everybody is very, very important. Increasing comprehensive planning and strategic thinking among our local officials. So many, they get elected, and then mostly they're dealing with financial issues. We don't have money for that, so cut it or whatever. But every cut has a consequence, intended or unintended. And so you may be affecting your neighborhoods or your housing stock or your attractiveness to other residents coming into your community by making those types of decisions. And then more collaboration. We have so many local jurisdictions here. You may think you're in Dayton, or you may think you're in Kettering, but then you may be in Centerville or Beaver Creek or Oakwood or Township. So we have so many local jurisdictions. Collaboration is huge. It's a huge C for this region, and that's what we try to bring to the table. It's like stitching a quilt. Yes, I wish that the whole region was called Montgomery, and that we had one governing board to deal with, but that's a pipe dream.
Right.
That doesn't happen here. That people like government close to them, and so that's why we have so many local jurisdictions. And so it's up to us to be that thread that kind of creates this quilt, if you will, for our region. So that's what we're here to do.
So that they can all pull together
That's
to
right.
try to address the inequity that's been created and invest in the future
Yeah.
with equity.
Yeah,
So-
well, if one community has a site that an outside developer likes, or a office building or what have you likes, fine. The workforce has to come from the whole region.
Right.
So that's a great way to partner if the adjoining communities know that this development may be coming. Let's get in lockstep with making sure that the workforce is there.
Yeah.
Communication, lines of communication, collaboration, those are all very important.
As you said, the very big C.
Mm.
Are there particular projects that you have coming onto the table that you think that you're excited about that will be addressing inequity, or is that still really to come down the road?
Well, that's really to come down the road. There are some strategic corridors that I'm very proud of that we're partnering on the Salem corridor.
Good.
In Dayton, it's going to go many miles outside of the core area. Likewise, Springfield Street, over on this side of the county with Riverside and with Dayton. So making those streets, upgrading them and making them more walkable and bikeable. We love bikes in this region. So that'll make those neighborhoods along there much more attractive. So.
And you were saying earlier, and I probably should have written it down at the time, but it takes how many years from thinking about something to actually planning, getting the funding?
From a line on
this is not a fast process.
No, not at all. We're dealing with a lot of moving parts. It takes 10 to 12 years to go from a concept on paper to actually being able to cut that ribbon.
Okay.
Just a lot of data specific to that area, environmental clearances, then the actual design of the project, bringing in the contractors. I heard this morning that there's a shortage of workers for contractors now across the country. Just not enough people in the trades, and so that's holding up projects such as our library.
Yes.
The main library was delayed because of a shortage of workforce. So a lot of these things are coming back to equity and making sure that we have the trained talent base that's ready to get to work as we do build new buildings and make things happen here in the region.
Yes, you've mentioned earlier on the program that we're a graying region, or
Yes.
that we're becoming, we're all aging.
Yes.
And I just wonder, within your profession, are there other communities that are also taking a look at these types of issues, particularly with the seniors, to see is there somebody ahead of us on doing this?
Well, it seems like we're all at the same place. We always, within our profession of city and regional planning, we all talk about equity, but there's not a very deep war chest of studies or strategies in that right now. But many Rust Belt communities like Dayton, if it's Detroit, if it's Cleveland, Cincinnati, and beyond are struggling with these same issues. Okay. So just the ability to bring in, enough development, enough funding to make something really happen, in terms of redevelopment, it just takes a while.
Yes, it does. Have to build that up. So you are planning to get this data out over the course of like the next year to as many bodies and entities and all of our governmental divisions that we have to get it all out to them, to spread it around so that they can use it in their planning session, and then also into, it sounds like, the educational community that you're very interested in partnering and taking it with that, because we have lack of people in trades or contractors or whatever it may be.
That's right.
Are there other sectors in particular that you're interested in getting this data to?
Well, workforce development, we've been talking about that, for many years, here as a region, making sure that people are trained. But educational attainment is also very, very important. Getting people, to high school and beyond, getting them out with diploma so that they are ready to start working. Our seniors programs, because we are graying, need to be in good shape as well. If one agency is going out to a rural community, why not bring along the services of another agency that that those residents may need. So we've been talking a lot about seniors transportation and related seniors programs, so that just to make the ride more efficient and the service more efficient, but also to get those services out into the community much quicker.
Again, it's that C for collaboration
That's
that
right.
you were stressing
At
earlier.
all levels of government,
yeah.
for sure.
And then transportation is just is so very key, so very important.
That's right.
To get people to the areas where the opportunities are, and to move those things around. So I'm sure you all are constantly planning on that, because
We are.
you've been doing that for years and years. That's your real bailiwick.
We do that well, but we
Yeah.
try to make sure that we don't have any adverse effects from that. I talked earlier about 675
Yes.
going in, and then that kind of shifting our growth and development, over to that corridor, which is great for that corridor, but what about everybody else? So just making sure that we don't have any harmful effects from these transportation investments is just very important. So that's why these studies. Most of our work is paid for through transportation dollars.
Yes.
Okay, so that we can start to look at the other side of the coin to see what effect there would be, and then conversely, how do we train our people? How do we found a problem? How do we implement new programming so that we can really help our community? The new programming that we'll need is not necessarily brick and mortar. It's more programming funding so that folks can, get to where they need to go. So.
Right. Improve education and those other opportunities.
That's right.
And safe homes and safe
That's right.
neighborhoods.
Child care,
right,
all of those things.
All of the. Well, I think that this is a very brave step for a planning community to be moving into a lot of these areas to work on. So, like our caller, I commend you. I find this data very exciting, and I know that there's going to be a lot of entities that are going to want to use this.
Thank you.
So, tell us a little bit about what resources you have to help people learn how to use this, who may not be expert planners like yourself.
Yeah.
What opportunities are there with Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission to help learn what do we do with this?
Right. There will be more listening sessions, as I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
But we'll also, if you want to get to our website, and if you're having any trouble at all, please call me or call one of my staff persons to help you through the process. There were about 5 staff members in our regional planning department that were involved in this profile, and the others. So Martin Kim leads that department, and then I'm Brian Martin. Just ask for Martin.
Just
You'll
ask
get
for
one
Martin.
of us
You're going to get
at
one.
the agency.
You're going to get help from Martin. If
One or the other, yes. I may start it, but then hand it over to him, or he may have a question and then call me.
Okay.
But yes.
That's great. Well, we're almost out of time, but before we do have to end up, I wanted to give you the opportunity to make a comment on anything that maybe I didn't ask you about.
Thank you. This is a very important topic, and everyone loves that we have the credibility across this region to do it. But I did write a quote for our press release, and I'll read it here.
Thank you.
Inequity affects our region's ability to keep and attract people and jobs. Understanding and addressing the issues of equity is essential in building a more resilient and healthy regional economy. The choices we make about future transportation and planning projects can help expand access to opportunity for our region. MVRPC, in partnership with the U.S. Department of Transportation, seeks to advance their Ladders of Opportunities mission of revitalizing communities, connecting people to resources, and improving economic vitality and socioeconomic mobility. In that paragraph, it touches all of our region, and it's just a very important topic, not only to study, but also to try to remedy.
Yes, yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate that a lot. And your meeting schedules that are open to the public to come, and they're all available on your website.
That's right,
when different topics are being discussed and
Correct.
announced. So, about how far out? Do you get them out like 3 months or something?
Well, we always do a press release or notification to the media about a meeting that's coming up. That'll probably usually be 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time.
Okay.
We haven't yet developed our schedule. There's a working group that's going to start to try to pull together the strategy behind all this. But
Good.
once their work is completed, I think we'll resume the listening sessions and get out into the community.
Good. Well, I'm sure you'll have good attendance at those listening sessions, as you have already. So, good. Well, thank you very much for joining me on the program
It's my
tonight.
pleasure.
It's been wonderful to learn all about this and commend your work and wish you all the best. Thank you very
so
much.
much.
And thank you to the viewers. Good evening.